Thank you. From various activities within ARMA as well as across other parts of the industry. For the rest of you, I'm Todd Chernikoff, as Rick said. I'm the Records and Information Management Team's Governance and Litigation Lead at Navy Federal Credit Union. We're the world's largest credit union. We're headquartered in Vienna, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. We have over 14.2 million members and over $180 billion in assets. We serve our members at about 350 branches worldwide, including a few dozen overseas. Today, I'm at my home office here in Silver Spring. I'm about 9 miles due north of the U.S. Capitol, for those of you who are geography nerds like myself. I've been in the RIM and IG space full-time since about 1995. I got my start in records management back in 1990 when I was hired as an urban planner in the zoning office of a planning department here in the local DC area. On day one, our senior admin came to my boss and said, and I quote, "I don't want to do the records anymore, make the new guy do it." So since then, I've shifted gears. I'm out of urban planning and into records and information management full-time, I'd say. Sort of more than full-time at times. All that out of the way, I'm not here speaking on behalf of Navy Federal, expressing my own opinions and perspectives. So don't blame Navy Federal, any other humans, organizations, or my dog over here on the couch behind me. Hopefully he doesn't do much more than just including the many things I do as part of Navy Federal's RIM team, as I act as the liaison between our team and the credit union's internal audit function, as well as the risk management function of our department with Enterprise Technology Services. I also lead our efforts to assist other departments and business functions in remediating audit and examination findings related to the management of records and information. This spans from findings within the departments and upward to government regulators, and we'll talk about government regulators in just a few. So here's a quick overview of what we're going to cover during our time together today. First, I'll talk about audits and examinations. What are they? Why are they performed? What manners did they come in, and what organizations and entities perform them? Next, I go into when, where, why, and how your IG or RIM organization will encounter audits and examinations. ARMA has 8 principles, while the Institute for Internal Auditors has the 3 lines of defense model, and in turn has 6 principles. For those of you who may not met me, I'll give you an introduction to them, or haven't met them, I'll give you an introduction to their principles. After that, we'll get into a bit about how-to, and I'll go into how you become prepared or better for the inevitable that auditors or examiners will come your way. And when they do, what happens? Through the how-to section, I'll talk about some of my experiences and my take on the process of audits and examinations and being prepared. And finally, I'll wrap up with 7 simple suggestions about being prepared and getting through an audit or an examination experience with your sanity at least relatively intact. But first, remember, like the subtitle says, it's not as bad as you think. There are times at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about questions and answers then. So just pop them in the chat. If I happen to see them and they happen to fit into things, I might get to them before the end of things. So if you consult the dictionary or something like dictionary.com, it will tell you that an audit is an official examination and verification of accounts and records, especially in financial accounts, or it's a report or statement reflecting an audit or a final statement of account. So why are audits conducted? Audits and examinations by internal and external groups provide independent assessment of your program in terms of risk management, governance, conformity with internal controls, regulatory compliance, and uncovering waste or fraud, as well as other purposes. At a high level, audits and examinations come in many forms and are conducted by a wide range of organizations inside and outside your immediate team, group, department, company, or agency. There are internal auditors in private and public companies, as well as within state and local governments, and also foreign governments, In Canada, they have some very similar organizations. Federal government agencies have inspector generals. Congress has the Government Accountability Office, and then there are auditors and regulators from outside your organization. So let's look at each of these categories of audits or examiners in a little bit more depth. According to the Institute of Internal Auditors, or the IIA, internal auditing is an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and to improve an organization's operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objectives by a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance processes. Internal audit activity provides an assurance that internal controls are in place and are adequate to mitigate the risks. Governance processes are effective and efficient, and organizational goals are being met, as well as objectives. Before I got to Navy Federal, I had some experience with internal auditors. At a local government where I worked and at another employer in the financial industry, actually a financial industry regulator, working as a records manager, I was asked about retention requirements and generally about how records management should be approached by the departments or business units. The internal auditors wanted to make sure they understood the discipline of records management before either creating or assessing controls related to records management or while they were examining a particular department or business unit. Again, within U.S. government agencies, there are inspectors general. Originally established by the Inspector General Act of 1978, they were created to conduct and supervise and investigations related to the programs and operations of federal agencies under 5 U.S.C. Chapter 4. The role of federal IGs is to prevent and detect waste, fraud, and abuse related to the agency's programs and operations, and to promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in the agency's operations and programs. There are OIGs, or Offices of Inspector Generals, in 74 federal agencies across the U.S. government. The OIGs in some federal agencies have investigators who conduct criminal investigations and have federal law enforcement powers. And basically, in effect, they carry guns and badges. And I've had a little bit of experience with them. If you want to talk to me about that later, they were a very interesting bunch, at least the ones I've met. The GAO, or Government Accountability Office, also known as Congress's watchdog, is an independent, nonpartisan agency that works for Congress. It examines how our taxpayer dollars are spent and provides Congress and federal agencies objective, fact-based information that helps the government save money and work more effectively. It saves the taxpayers billions of dollars a year. GAO was established by Congress through the Budget and Accounting Act of 1921. That act made GAO independent of the executive branch of government and provided a broad authority to investigate how public's dollars are spent. The GAO work is done at the request of congressional committees or subcommittees, or as required by law or congressional committee reports, and also per other agencies' congressional protocols. GAO is the supreme audit institution for the United States. Federal and state auditors look to it to provide standards for internal audits, controls, fiscal audits, and other type of government audits. Audits of private companies, as well as SEC registered brokers and dealers. So if you ask Google or you look up on Wikipedia what the big four firms do, this is sort of something that you'll see. They provide audit, assurance, consulting, financial advisory, risk management, and compliance services. According to Investopia.com, much of the auditing work is done by these firms for some of the largest public companies, including auditing the fiscal statements of the vast majority of Fortune 500 companies. As risks, shareholder expectations, and the regulatory environment evolve, they provide high-quality audits that meet the efficiency needs of capital markets upon which they're built. If you look at EY or Ernst& Young's website, and I'll pick on them since my brother-in-law's wife used to work for them. She recently retired. Thank goodness for that. Though not as an accountant, she was in training executives across the globe. They have multidisciplinary teams that deliver independent audits that benefit investors and the broader economy while bringing independent insights into both management and the company's audit committees. So as businesses, including the technology that runs the businesses, becomes more complex, so do the methods for these firms to conduct their audits and examinations. They're taking data first and digital auditing approaches to dig deeper and to provide insights that are becoming more and more prevalent across the board. As with auditing, looking at risk in terms of internal controls is now focusing on the digital aspects of these businesses, such as looking at the digital controls, and we'll talk more in depth about controls in a few minutes, as well as the overview of IT assurance. Just make sure I'm on target here. Since I work in the financial services sector, I decided to focus this slide on the regulatory side of audits and examinations, and mostly on some of the regulators that look at the businesses in this sector. As an example, the NCUA, or the National Credit Union Administration's mission is to ensure the nation's system of credit unions remains safe and sound. To do this, the NCUA examination process focuses on risks to the broader system and the fund that insures credit unions in the US. And this is the body that audits and regulates the organization I work for. The NCUA looks to identify and assess credit unions' system risks, threats, and vulnerabilities. It determines the scale of those risks and how to mitigate unacceptable levels of risk throughout the examination, supervision, and enforcement programs. The FDIC, or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, a better known independent agency also created by Congress, they deal with maintaining the financial stability and public confidence in our nation's banks. To accomplish this, the FDIC, like the NCUA, insures deposits, examines and supervises financial institutions for safety and soundness, and protects consumers. When financial institutions fail or approach failure, it manages the process to make large and complex financial institutions resolvable, and also manages receiverships for financial institutions that fail. The PBGC, or Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, another independent government agency, works similarly to insure and protect pension funds. FINRA, the Financial Institution Regulatory Authority, also known as NASD. In the past, I worked as records manager for a couple decades ago. They're authorized by Congress to make sure that the broker-dealer industry operates fairly and honestly. It oversees over 500 million brokers across the US and uses AI and machine learning technology to keep an eye on the markets. It also examines broker-dealer firms to ensure that they're following the rules. There are many other government agencies, large and small, that act as regulators of various industries and business segments. According to the AICPA, the American Institute of CPAs, Certified Public Accountants, each year the federal government awards billions of dollars of grants, loans, loan guarantees, property, competitive agreements, or cooperative agreements, interest subsidies, insurance, food commodities, and other non-cash assistance, and direct appropriations and federal cost reimbursements, which are subject to compliance and audit regulations. Often those audit requirements also require financial statement audits performed under AICPA auditing standards and the government auditing standards. This is the aspect of ensuring that our tax dollars are spent wisely and properly. Audits and examinations are part of what ensures that we get what we pay for through our tax dollars. Now that we've established what audits and examinations are and why they exist and are performed, and the many forms they come in, let's see how your team might be dragged into this process. And this list is not in any random order. I have sort of a reasoning for this. First, and what some might consider the worst, is that the auditors or examiners show up at your door, invite you to a meeting, or might send you an email. Hate that invited to a meeting part. So your program is being examined directly. Next, and again, these are sort of in decreasing intensity, a program or office you're associated with is being examined. This could be the whole department you're under or one that you might do work with, for example. Then there's a situation where your program or office or department is the custodian of records or evidence of a program being examined. This isn't so bad, but it does mean work for your crew. And after that, and I might consider this one sort of fits into the second spot, your program is providing guidance or policy on management of records or evidence being used by a program that's being examined. So, for example, the record retention schedule, the RIM policy, something of that nature. So sometimes this situation means you have a lot of explaining to do. Auditors or examiners sometimes want to know the gross, deep meanings and reasons behind the guides you've issued or the policies that exist. Who created them, why they were created, the legal or regulatory basis behind them, and in some cases, flat out tell you that the other program you have been advising is doing something wrong. They're not following your policy, the schedule, procedures, something of that nature. And in some cases, that means you need to fix something. And finally, you're being asked more generally about how records are managed across your organization. What are the policies, processes, procedures behind records management or information governance in your broad organization? So the title of this program advertises there's this thing or this concept called the 3 lines of defense. It's a model created by the IIA. I won't dig too deep into it. You're welcome to do your own research. It's easy to find. But even before learning about it from the IIA perspective, I've seen the concept discussed in our internal audit group's internet page, where I really got involved with them, just sort of back in my beginning of my term here at Navy Federal. And as I became sort of the point person for our team's relationship, I've grown to see how this really works. So let's take a little bit of a look into it. So the first line of defense exists within the business operation, sort of within all the business organizations in your company or agency. The managers, the leadership of your department owns and manages their risks. And if you look at sort of the bottom left here, it talks about the provision of services or client managing risks, sort of what your piece of the organization or what your C-level in your organization has to do to make sure things work properly to avoid really becoming a focus of those other lines of defense. Your second line, that's sort of the people who look at things, your risk managers, either enterprise risk management or department risk management. And then you've got that third line of defense. You've got internal audit. They're that independent, objective group looking at things. And all this is happening underneath, the governing body. Who is really accountable within your organization? The board of directors, the CEO, people like that. They're looking to make sure that there's integrity, leadership, and transparency across the organization. So under the 3 lines of defense, I said there are 6 principles. So let's look at them in a little bit more depth. The first principle of governance. Governance of an organization requires appropriate structures and processes that enable accountability by the governing body to the stakeholders for organizational oversight through that integrity, leadership, and transparency. Actions include managing risk by management to achieve the objectives of the organization and through a proper risk-based decision-making and the application of proper resources. And then there's the assurance and advice by that independent internal audit function that provides clarity and confidence and to promote and facilitate continuous improvement through rigorous inquiry and insightful communications. So again, we're talking about that governing body here in the second principle. They create appropriate structures and processes to make effective governance. They also want those to achieve those organizational objectives and to conduct activities that are aligned to prioritize the interest of the stakeholders. That could even include external shareholders. The governing body delegates responsibility and provides resources to your organizational managers in your departments to achieve the objectives of the organization while ensuring proper legal, regulatory, and ethical expectations are met. And again, establishes that and oversees that independent, objective, competent internal audit function that provides clarity and confidence on progress towards achieving those objectives. Third, management is responsible to achieve those organizational objectives. It also makes sure that the first and second line roles are clear. Again, that first line role mostly directly aligned to the delivery of products, services to the client organization outside, and also their supporting functions such as enterprise risk management. And again, they provide for that second line. The fourth principle talks about the three-line roles. Internal audit provides that independent objective assurance through their common application and making sure it provides all those findings to management and any other governing bodies to promote and facilitate continuous improvement. And in doing so, it may consider the assurance from external and other auditors. Again, we talk about the fifth principle, the independence of the third line. We want to make sure that internal audit is not beholden to others other than the overall objectives of the organization. They're given access to the proper people, resources, data, records, you name it. They should have unfettered access so that they can be free of bias and interference in planning and delivering their audit services. And finally, the sixth principle, creating and providing value. All these roles looking at the audit function and examination function, working together collectively, are contributing to creating and protecting the value of the organization. They want to make sure that they are aligning their activities and achieving things through proper communication, cooperation, and collaboration. And this ensures the reliability, coherence, and transparency of information needed for risk-based decision making. So this is all really about making sure your organization acts properly, ethically, and effectively in providing its goods and services. So preparing for the inevitable, this is sort of the how-to portion of the presentation. So how do you get ready? How do you become prepared, for all this experience? First, you need to know your organization, your enterprise, and where those three lines sit and how you may or will become involved with them. So it's that knowing really how all the pieces fit together. So as I mentioned before, in my role at Navy Federal, I'm our team's liaison to these groups. I work with our Department's Risk Management Group. I work with compliance, the Office of General Counsel, enterprise risk management, as well as information security. And in our organization, information security is not within the IT group, it's out there in the security department. And finally, with our internal audit group. Our RIM program, we're an over 90-year-old institution, but our RIM program's only been around for about 6 years. We're regularly examined by our department's risk management group and by internal audit. They have a cycle that they come and visit us. Sometimes it's annually, sometimes it's not. Our internal audit department has annual priorities and plans of who they're going to look at and who they're going to examine, but those can change based on changing conditions within the organization or based on external forces. In addition to those actual examinations, there are regular cycles of looking at what are they planning to do and what risks are being examined. And we're also now we're being asked by other departments, how do we look at the risks when it comes to records and information management? How do you look at what might happen and the likelihood of what might happen? And that sort of creates sort of a score of how things are looked at. And in addition to our program being examined, again, we're also called upon by groups to help them fix problems, help create or examine controls when it comes to retention requirements, other RIM-related issues. So we're examined and we help the examiners look at things. So the final area we're called upon to help is when external auditors such as the NCUA, we talked about them, and the FDIC a while back, make findings and have recommendations to remediate issues that are identified that are related to records and information management. And typically what we see is mostly it's about retention requirements. It might be that the retention requirements aren't necessarily aligning with how the business needs to operate, or a business unit might not be conforming to retention requirements. So we're asked to assist in making sure that any information that might be needed for examiners related, when they're looking at things, is provided. If they come in and ask about our retention schedule or policies or instructions or procedures, we provide them. And also making sure that what the instruction or policy or the record retention schedule says is really happening. And sort of drilling down from the high level in the previous slides, to help our business units, we also provide an audit preparation checklist. We've created this with some of our external consultants, and this helps our business units look at what is it that they need to do on a regular basis. What are the purposes of this checklist? We want to look at the activities, what should be overseen and executed within the business units. We look at areas such as training. We look at areas such as creating file plans. We also suggest at what frequency people might need to examine things, and what are the other considerations that they need to look at to make sure that they're, one, creating a good program that's going to manage representation properly, and two, how are they going to pass muster when examiners come looking at them. So, in the overview, I promised to wrap things up with 7 simple suggestions about being prepared so you can get through auditory examinations with your sanity at least relatively intact. Again, that first thing is don't panic. You've got this. Remain calm. Audits and examinations are not meant to beat up on you. They're there to help understand what's happening and how to make improvements where they're needed. And now that you know what audits and examinations are and why they're performed, this will help you better able to understand what's happening and how to cope with it when it really comes your way. It will or become really apparent what type of audit or examination has come your way. So again, now that you know about the many forms of audits and examinations, you should better be able to cope with what hand you're being dealt. Your organization's intersections with audits and examinations, they'll come in various forms. Who's looking at what? Is it directly related to you? How tangential is it? So you'll know sort of what steps to take to help things out. And then again, think about the 3-line model and how each line affects your business, as well as those 6 associated principles and how they fit in. You'll be prepared, as we said, the motto Scouts. It'll help you when you have to deal with the audits and examinations. And finally, the opportunity to execute on what you've learned. When the time comes, will you know, since you've been here, you've looked at things, you're now prepared to help your organization and the other businesses. Are you really ready for this? So, thank you very much. Let's look at the questions online as well as raising your hand and coming off mute. So what have we got queued up? Everyone still out there?
We're here, Todd.
Okay, so the relationship between GOA, what is that supposed to be, GAO and Dodge? I don't know of any direct correlation. But I guess looking at a Dodge, my personal opinion is from what I've seen, they're not looking at things in terms of fact-based, unbiased, searching for waste, fraud, and abuse. They've got a different agenda. They're looking at cost and not necessarily effectiveness and efficiency. Just cutting dollars. Anybody else? Let me look at that.
So Todd, this is Beth.
Sure.
Do you have any recommendations for maintaining any kind of documentation, lessons learned or whatever after like an initial audit so that audits in the future would be more successful? For example, I worked with a group who, again, records management becomes an issue when there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And this group had intense difficulty producing documentation needed for an audit.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for assistance to prevent that, knowing that audits were going to happen every 2 years. So is there some kind of recommendation that you would have for an organization to maintain not just the needed documents for the audit, but how to cooperate, if there's a change in personnel or something like that, so that there's continuity and hopefully keeping the organization above water and successful?
The one thing that comes first to mind is making sure that any operating business unit keeps good documentation about any records management procedures that they have over and above the corporate or agency requirements. We are now in a process of creating outreach to have departments do more in-depth for those who don't already. Some of our businesses have very detailed things about how to treat their records. But for those who don't, to create more department level procedures, processes, et cetera, as well as associated training. And we're willing to come out there and help them with creating that training. I'm right now working on a presentation that we're going to take out on the road to our departments, suggesting just that. But also in terms of keeping a history of those, what's happened and how they can track things. Yeah, they need to obviously have their own documentation, including checklists, to keep them on the right track. Let's see.
Todd, I see a question here that someone wants to know, is examination an IRS term?
I'm sure they have their own definition of it, but I use it more generically. I look at it, if you're not doing something that's defined as, let's say, an audit by your organization, it might be, and depends upon your organization, you might use the term examination, looking at things, a review, and anything that just sort of looks at something in more depth. So I'm not using it in any specific defined fashion. Have you found a system to use to manage inventory of your records, or are you using Access or Excel to manage functions? I've worked in all sorts of organizations who've used all sorts of tools, even down to I've built Access databases myself. We use Excel sort of for our file plans. In my current organization, the RIM team we don't actually physically manage the records. We have a tool that can be used for that, but most records are managed by the departments at the department level in their applications, some on-prem, some in the cloud. Is retention for team chats, things are rolling by me. What is retention for team chats? Similar. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. We're actually doing some things where we're looking at splitting channels, having certain retention. Maybe if you've got a project-based channel, it might have a different retention than just one-to-one chats. So it depends upon your organization. We're actually just talking to our ODC and compliance and some people on our M365 team about that just an hour or so ago. Things keep shifting. Okay, I'm also in the financial services space, and my employer has multiple accounting and audit firms reviewing our books and operations throughout the year. This serves as a kind of insurance policy against the examiners finding something egregious. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of a balanced approach that could be taken so that you don't just get one single view. Any favorite stories you can share, maybe where the names are changed to protect the innocent, any zany that you've seen and experienced in relation to this? Yeah, one comes to mind. I was actually helping do a RIM engagement at a OIG at a federal agency. It's one of these ones that I've mentioned. I won't say which one it was, but the people who actually went out and did the examinations. I mean, these guys carried guns and badges. The OIG in this organization, is probably similar to others, is literally walled off from the agency. They have their own entrance. They have their own IT, email, etc., stuff that was not connected to the rest of the agency. But the examiner people would not share their examination for how they manage the records of examinations with the records manager within their unit. And I thought that was really crazy. So that was one of those strange stories. Do you recommend using e-discovery tools to map the location of potentially responsive documents for an audit? That is an approach that could be taken depending upon your organization. I look at using discovery as not specifically litigation based, but could be used for any examination, review, outside look at your stuff. So many questions. How can we contribute to audits if our RIM program is not yet mature? As a RIM team, should we have an audit procedure or practice? Do other RIM programs have guides to just follow the lead of the auditors? I guess, in terms of, maturity, and being recognized as a, authority by your organization, that sure helps. Yes, I mean, I think you should have, you might not call it an audit procedure, but you could have internally looking at your RIM program, checklists and goals and whatnot, but also when you're looking, if you have the ability, if you're authorized to examine or review other, the business units, you should have some sort of guidance that you use. Part of our charter says that we can monitor compliance with our RIM policy. So we do go out, I go out and do little checks. I mean, again, I'm not authorized at the same level as internal audit or department risk, but I do go out there and do some checks and talk to people and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Advice for those who are involved in internal audits, but no action is taken to remediate issues. I don't know why someone would conduct an audit and not look at remediation. But if internal audit's not going to do the remediation, then whatever team has the findings should work to remediate the findings. Otherwise, what good is having policies, processes, schedules, et cetera, if they're not going to be followed? If you don't manage records, do you focus on disseminating policies, training, et cetera? Yeah, in a sense, I'm sort of the governance person and stuff. So yes, a lot of my work is in terms of creating policies, updating procedures, updating our RIM. It's what we call instruction, but it's what others might call a policy. I create required annual training. I work with others within our organization to create other training, such as legal holds and whatnot. So yes, my particular function is not directly managing records. We do have a team within our group that runs a tool that is used to store records that don't have other good locations. So that's a good chunk of our team as well. But we also have a litigation support guy who works with OG's, our Office of General Counsel, making sure that he knows where records are, profile systems, make sure they know what the retention is, who are the proper people to contact when someone goes looking for records for litigation and whatnot. So many questions. How can we contribute to audits? Okay, that one was already covered. Okay. Anything else? Anybody want to come off mute if they don't want to type?
Todd, I think somebody asked how many are on your team.
Well, oh yeah. Now we have about 24,000 employees plus. I think if you look at our total population, we have about 30,000 people. Our RIM team is about a dozen people, and we are a geographically diverse group. About 5 or 6 of us here in the DC area at headquarters. We've got one person at our big facility in Pensacola. We've got 3 others in Florida, and I'm including contractors. And then some contractor in Chicago, another in Albuquerque. Yeah, so we're all over the place. We're about a dozen people covering about, say a population of 24 to 36,000. What kind of roles do members of your team have? Okay, so there's my manager. She's sort of the quote RIM manager. She also manages the technology portfolio for our CEO and president's office. I work with another analyst who does things such as worked with departments, project teams to make sure whatever systems they're building or buying are in conformance with our RIM requirements. We've got a litigation support analyst. We've got a couple, 2 or 3 people who we're an agile organization, so our scrum masters and people like that. We've got a project manager who manages our records management system group, and we have about 4 or 5 people who work in that team actually running, doing intake and running that tool. And within, some of our departments have actual people who have records management roles. We have dotted lines to people in the different departments who act as our sort of liaisons, our record trustees. There are people who do part-time record store duties within the department. Then upper level people who act as the accountable records owners within the departments. There's also a whole other team who does data governance and data management, data storage, data custodian, and people like that. we have a good relationship with them. We're just not linked at the hip. And then we've got a lot of people who literally have their hands on the keyboards who act as custodians of records. And a lot of those people are within enterprise technology services, since we are the IT shop. We don't have, as some organizations, agencies I work with have very departmental or sub-agency based IT. We're a very centralized IT operation. Where do you fall on the IG maturity scale? That's a good question. Since we started our program 6 years ago, we have been using the ARMA principles. We use 5 out of the 8. We don't use all 8, but we are